This is Newsroom. Happy Easter, everybody. Welcome. I'm Evan Jansen. As the Easter weekend is upon us, today's show is not a live one. It's broadcast from our studios here in Auckland Park, though. But we will be taking a look back at the highlights of this week. We start with Muhammadu Buhari's historic election victory in Nigeria this past week. We also take a look at the fuel, electricity and possible interest rate hike that's, well, set for a little bit later this month. Well, we'll also look at the effect on consumers. Remember, we'll be back with a live broadcast of Newsroom on Tuesday.
In Lagos, Nigerians express their delight as Muhammadu Buhari becomes the next president of the West African country. 3 decades after seizing power in a military coup, Buhari is put in charge of Africa's biggest economy and one of its most turbulent democracies.
I am very happy. Very happy because, this election made me to understand that all that I went through trying to ensure that I cast my vote, all the effort was never a wasted one.
In an unprecedented step, Jonathan phoned Buhari to concede defeat. He also issued a statement urging his supporters to accept the results.
Although some people have expressed mixed feelings about the results announced by the Independent National Electoral Commission, I urge those who may feel aggrieved to follow due process based on our Constitution and our electoral laws in seeking redress. As I have always affirmed, nobody's ambition is worth the blood of any Nigerian.
Buhari praised President Jonathan as a worthy opponent and said Nigeria has shown the world that the country is embracing democracy.
We have put one-party state behind us. We have voted for a party and president that will serve and govern but never rule over you. Change has come. A new day and a new Nigeria are upon us. The victory is yours, and the glory is that of our nation, Nigeria.
The margin of victory. Buhari got 15.4 million votes to Jonathan's 13.3 million, was enough to prevent any challenge. The rules state Jonathan must officially hand over on May 29th. Jonathan's People's Democratic Party has been in charge in Nigeria since the end of army rule in 1999.
Now, Nigerian President Goodluck Jonathan has conceded defeat to opposition challenger Muhammadu Buhari. He's also urged his supporters to follow due process in channeling their frustrations at losing the election over the weekend. Northern Nigeria erupted in celebration at news of the stunning election victory by more than 2 million votes. Buhari seized power in a military coup back in 1983, but he is now the first Nigerian to oust an opponent via the ballot box. Jonathan's People's Democratic Party has been in charge since the end of army rule in 1999, but have been losing popularity due to corruption scandals and the rise of Boko Haram's Islamist insurgency in the northeast of that country. Now, senior researcher for the South African Institute of International Affairs, Churimo Hengari, is with us here in the studio this morning. Very good morning to you. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you. Good morning, Eben.
A new president. It's almost unheard of in Nigeria. Well, it's unprecedented to be beaten at the ballot box as it is. Are we seeing the new chapter, as people are calling it, in the world or in the life of Nigerians?
Well, I think it's a very important chapter in the life of Nigeria as a state. Since 1960, the country has never seen the change of political alternatives in a manner that is peaceful. It has always been through a coup d'etat. So I think it's a very important chapter for that, for Africa's most populous nation and also Africa's largest economy.
Let's talk about the poll itself. What do you think was the thing that swayed it in the end? Was it a nation tired of endemic corruption that believed Muhammadu Buhari's campaign, that he was going to be the man to put an end or to put a damper on rampant corruption in Nigeria?
Well, I think it's also a population that was looking for another alternative, because since 1999, Nigeria has largely been ruled by one party. So I think you also have a combination of fatigue with one alternative, and also the issues that we've just mentioned, including corruption, and not to mention the rise of Boko Haram in Nigeria, which has created a very fragile state.
You talk about Boko Haram, and Muhammadu Buhari is known as a strong man, a military man at the end of the day. Do you believe that people believe that he's the guy to really crack down on Boko Haram and really bring the northeast of the country back into line?
I think possibly his tough rhetoric on the question, and also him running on a platform of change, somehow swayed the dynamic in his favor. But his rule for 20 months from 1983 to 1984 was seen as sort of a period where Nigeria, where many Nigerians saw discipline in the civil service, even though some of the methods were quite questionable. So I think there is belief that General Buhari would bring change to Nigeria.
There was a lot made of the 6-week postponement of the election. It was said to be a time that was needed to crack down on Boko Haram and make sure that his election could go ahead and be free and fair. Do you think that the back of the Boko Haram revolution, as it is, has been broken by military operations beforehand?
Well, I think to a certain degree, yes, because Nigeria apparently over the past 2 decades has not renewed its military infrastructure, and it only did so from February, and with renewed determination on the part of the government of Goodluck Jonathan to deal with Boko Haram. I think we saw the requisite changes in the dynamic in the northeast, and I think it's also important to note that the regional cooperation through the regional multinational force also changed the dynamic. When Nigeria came on board, I think Boko Haram was to a certain degree also defeated.
Were you surprised by the demeanor of Goodluck Jonathan, not just after the defeat, but also before the election? Friday last week, he gave Muhammadu Buhari a hug beforehand and said things like, we'll accept whatever the outcome of this election is, would really kind of set the tone for how this election went ahead. You surprised that this kind of statesmanship that hasn't really been seen before?
Well, I think I was not surprised, because when Goodluck Jonathan came into power in 2011, his characteristics were already known. He was seen as a modest man who was likely to clean up Nigeria. So his demeanor is really that of a humane person who was likely to also behave that way. So I'm not really surprised.
What's the message this election is sending to the people, but more importantly, the politicians who've always seen political office as a gateway to self-enrichment in Nigeria?
Well, I think since Buhari is coming in on a platform of change, and corruption is also one of the key issues on the agenda, we are likely to see a new chapter in Nigerian politics. There's no doubt about that. Many Nigerians are tired with a corrupt political system that has led to bad service delivery.
Now, the transition. Let's quickly talk about the transition. It's not just the next couple of days, it's the weeks and months ahead. Do you expect this transition to be peaceful and with the best interests of all the people of Nigeria to go ahead peacefully?
Well, one can only hope, especially since the outgoing president, Goodluck Jonathan, issued out a communique in which he urged his supporters not to take to the streets or to engage in any violent confrontations, because the ambitions of one person are not worth the death of a single Nigerian. So I think that was quite positive on his part, and possibly that message will be followed by by his supporters. So it is still early to tell. There's no doubt about that, whether there will be violence or not, because Nigeria's politics is a combination of ethnicity, religion, which at times can be also very toxic.
Yeah. Well, we hope it's a peaceful transition. Until now, it's been very positive. It's been a fantastic advertisement for democracy on the African continent, especially in West Africa.
Who are we, you ask? This is who we are.
We are technologically driven.
We are unashamedly Afrocentric.
We advise you not only on legal matters,
but on health issues as well.
We bring imagination to life.
We celebrate arts and culture and lifestyle.
We tackle life challenges head on.
we dig deep, we probe, we question.
We invite you to take a view from our house, as we tell it without fear, separating fiction from factual.
We are the SABC News Channel.
All news, all global, all the time.
Who are we, you ask?
This is who we are.
We are technologically driven.
We are unashamedly Afrocentric.
We advise you not only on legal matters,
but on health issues as well.
We bring imagination to life.
We celebrate arts and culture and lifestyle.
We tackle life challenges head on.
we dig deep, we probe, we question.
We invite you to take a view from our house, as we tell it without fear, separating fiction from factual.
We are the SABC News Channel.
All news, all global, all the time.
Cameroon's economic capital, a unique art collection is on display. Titled Yesterday's Memory, Tomorrow's Memory.
We are trying to preserve this heritage despite many things that have changed in the designing, embroidery and the model.
If I'm telling you, you don't like it, I call it defeat.
Join Musam Khalifi on Afro Showbiz every Saturday at 19:30 CAT.
April is set to force consumers to pay more for petrol, electricity, and there's a possible interest rate hike. And these are not the only concerns in consumers' minds. South Africa is bracing itself for another round of labour unrest. The Department of Home Affairs gets ready to go on strike over working hours next month. And collective wage negotiations are difficult to ignore as the postal industry strikes. Last week, 21,000 contract workers at Medupi Power Station went on a one-day strike, even though the country faces electricity challenges. Does this mean the country will soon be facing more tough economic times? Well, I'm joined in studio by the head of market and economic research at Investment Solutions, Lesiba Motata, who will tell us a little bit more. Good morning, Lesiba.
Morning, even.
Always nice to have you with us, mate.
Indeed.
You always try and put a nice spin on it for us, but the outlook looks rather dour, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Give us a quick heads up. How do you view the next 2 months?
Now, it's a difficult time because you had taxes going up, which will be reflected in the petrol price tonight at 12 o'clock, with the petrol price going up as much as it is. So you're also getting interest rates that are coming up is because of the weak currency. You're seeing it come through inflation numbers. It came down, but it's going to be pushed up. So you get food prices are also going up. We're beginning to import maize, as opposed to be net exporters of last year. Now we're importing maize.
Yeah.
So you get a weak rand, you're getting taxes coming through, and all that is pushing up the inflation outlook in an environment of very weak economic activity. The labor situation is also quite problematic. I think we really have seen the worst last year. I'm hoping that we don't see as protracted of strikes like we've seen last year. That would be very detrimental to growth. That was about 1% of GDP last year.
The prophets of doom who write in the daily newspapers say, if we have another period like we had last year, our economy will collapse. What do you say?
Just word on the street and the conversation that's happening between the employers and the employees. They're much more mature this year. I think there's some meeting of the minds, particularly in the public sector when you listen to the teachers and SATU, etc. It looks like there's meeting of minds and there could be a solution. There's always a give and take, a tough conversation. But from my sense, it looks like we're not going to see last year. So there will be a conclusion of a better deal for both parties, and that will result with economic growth going forward. The headwind is really just on electricity supply, which can be a big one.
Now, I heard there might be some good news that our statisticians got our growth outlook wrong in the previous 12, 18 months. Have you got any more information on that, and how does that then play out into the wider economy?
Oh, well, the outlook is such that because you're having base effects having to come through in manufacturing and in mining because they were worst hit last year, that will contribute positively to growth. But also our largest trading partner, Europe, is having positive economic surprises. That will be good for South Africa. The US seems to be doing well, also is our trading partner. That could be good for South Africa, although China is seemingly slowing down somewhat. So there could be upside surprises on growth. But even what we're talking about here is about, as opposed to talking to 2.1, we're talking about 2.3 or 2.5% growth, which is still very, very anemic given the needs of the economy.
Yeah, we need 5 points really to make some headway. But with this rate hike that could happen now in May, and some say definitely will happen in July, what should consumers, people like myself, be thinking about?
Yeah, no, it's a tough situation for the SARB in that we are in a weak economic environment. And unfortunately, they have to hike rates. If you look at what we call inflation expectations, they're anchored at the upper end of the inflation target range at 6%. What that means is that consumers need to be aware that we're going to potentially see higher interest rates. And if anything goes wrong, I'll be dismayed to even say that we may see higher taxes. We're talking about the health bill that needs to be passed. All these things that require revenue from the government side could mean higher taxes. All that means that we need to have secure economic outcomes for households, pay down debt, don't take new debt, and make sure that your balance sheet is strong.
How do we save then in this time? How do we save money? Where do we get money to save, Lesiba?
Yeah, no, it is a difficult time. South Africa has the lowest saving rates. If you look in BRICS, it is difficult, but what you need to do is downgrade. You got big cars, buy a smaller one.
I've got a small car already, Lesiba.
Hey?
I've got a small car already.
I know it's a difficult time for consumers, but we just need to tighten our belts. It's not easy to be going out and splashing into spending.
Is there any good news in the longer forecast, 3 years, 5 years?
I'm afraid it's difficult. The path at which we've taken on policy, it's very difficult to see better improvements, because should anything go wrong, you get higher taxes. If anything goes wrong in terms of a currency, what happened in Russia is when you get currency depreciation in a sharp way, central bankers respond with higher interest rates. In that time, they did 6.5% in one meeting. I'm not saying it will happen in our country, but the role of a central bank is also to protect the value of a currency. And should anything happen, they could be forced to hike rates more than we see now.
Well, Lesiba, thank you for joining us. Always nice to have you with us. That's the head of market and economic research at Investment Solutions, always giving us a real honest spin on where we are. No, never sugarcoats it, does he? Save your money. Don't spend it on a big car.
It's
It's me, your Minister of Parties and Recreation. There's a serious thing happening in our country. Non-participation. No one is dancing with Mlungu because he doesn't have rhythm. That is why we must make party South Africa's 12th official language to unite us under one language that we all understand. Party. From now on, participation for the nation.
Help make Party South Africa's 12th official language. Sign the petition today.
The judge slammed corruption in both the private and public sector. Referring to irregular and wasteful government expenditure, he said it could no longer go on.
The high-profile corruption scandal has dominated Spain's headlines in recent weeks. The scandal touching a nerve as Spain emerges from its downturn after a slew of corruption cases involving politicians and the king's sister.
Tourism is a vital part of the economy. It contributes about 5% to the country's GDP and is a significant contributor to various industries such as food production, retail and transport.
For all your business news, stay tuned to your favorite channel, SABC News, at 1 Monday to Friday.
I would say there's no supplements or minerals, something that you can take will completely prevent cancer.
Although vitamins help the body produce and use energy, they do not provide energy themselves because they don't contain calories. Supplements also cannot be used to replace foods or make up for poor dietary habits.
Cases in Liberia are currently doubling every 15 to 20 days, and those in Sierra Leone and Guinea are doubling every 30 to 40 days.
Hi, I'm Dr. Sello Matau. Watch Health Talk every Saturday on SABC News.
Now, the University of Cape Town Senate voted, and now the Rhodes statue will be moved from the university's campus. But where will it go? The statue of Rhodes had human excrement, urine, and pig manure thrown at it. And after UCT students spoke up about removing it for what they call institutional racism, others across the country have also started to follow in their footsteps, as there are still many historic statues some think are symbols of oppression. So do these statues have a place in South Africa today? To talk to us about this, we are joined from Cape Town by Dr. Adeke Adebajo, the Director for the Centre for Conflict Resolution. A very good morning to you, Doctor. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you. Good morning.
Doctor, why do you think it's taken so long, more than 20 years into the democratic process, for a debate to emerge around the legacy of the likes of Cecil John Rhodes?
I think there was a feeling, particularly with Nelson Mandela as the first democratic president of South Africa, promoting reconciliation, that it was probably better to leave the past and focus on the present, and the feeling that there were other priorities that needed to be taken care of. But I think 20 years later now, part of that has gone, part of that rationale has gone, and people are now beginning to question entrenched histories and symbols that are very oppressive and offensive for the majority of the population.
Within that context that you're talking about now, is there a place for this statue to be? If so, where do you believe would be the right place for a statue like that of a Cecil John Rhodes?
I think it's very important to note, as many of the students that are protesting have themselves said, that they don't want to destroy history and erase it and wipe it away as if it hadn't happened. And their suggestion was to put this statue in a museum where one could provide a context for the sort of character Cecil Rhodes was, who was an imperialist, a plunderer, a racist, and one can put it in a museum where that context is actually provided. And I agree with the suggestion of the students that that's a good way of preserving history while not forgetting it.
Within this context now, this small battle has been won. What do you think this means for other symbols around South Africa? We see somewhat of a groundswell starting to happen. Do you see that happening more and more? And what are your views on it?
Well, I think we have seen it happening more and more. You know, there was a statue of King George at the University of KwaZulu-Natal, which has been defaced. And you've had questioning of Louis Botha standing outside of the South African Parliament and people like Julius Malema calling for it to be removed. I think that it's healthy to have a debate and a discussion on what the symbols are that actually litter the post-apartheid landscape and what they mean to various people. And one thing that's often pointed out is that the symbols of apartheid domination, people like Verwoerd and others, were removed after 1994. But British symbols like Cecil Rhodes, like the King George that I mentioned, were a lot slower. So my feeling is that it's healthy to have the debate, but one should also consult and listen to other views that may not agree, and at least try to convince them of the wisdom of it, while, of course, going through normal processes.
Doctor, what about flaring up racial tensions and opening new wounds for a younger generation in South Africa that seem to have moved on a little bit? Is this not cannon fodder for those that want to deepen racial division in South Africa?
I don't actually think so, because when I saw the 500 students that were demonstrating at the University of Cape Town, one of the things I found most impressive is that it was a multiracial protest. And when I watched also the discussions and debates at the University of Cape Town on the removal of the statue, it was both black and white students and so-called coloreds and Asians that were speaking up against the statue and against symbols. And I think what is important here to realize, listening to the students, they are saying that the statue is only a metaphorical symbol for greater institutional racism at some of these institutions. And they're talking about curriculums needing to be changed, black professors teaching them, and these seem to be quite reasonable things. So I see this as progress rather than fueling racial tensions.
Officially, what would you like to see happen next in the process of dealing with the issues of statues and, call it, symbols of oppression?
Well, I mean, I think the dialogue that has been ignited by the students at the University of Cape Town needs to continue. And I think there's a process where the Heritage Council and the government has to consult in some cases with various populations to determine what happens in terms of these statues. But I do think it's important to try to find imaginative ways of dealing with it. For example, Freedom Park was juxtaposed with the Voortrekker Monument, which is preserving two histories. And I think in some cases there could be ways of doing that as well, but it's a very important dialogue that has started.
Doctor, I thank you for joining us and giving us your views on this very emotive subject here in South Africa. Thank you once again.
over 20 years now, South Africa has just been one big construction site, building houses.
This is the only country in the world that provides free housing. The government has done very well in this particular area.
What are the challenges facing human settlements?
Most of the people who move into urban centers are looking for jobs, basically, and that increases the pressure in that particular area. We know exactly what needs to be done where and how it should be done.
They were also building houses for married staff, and you had the married quarters and the hostels. And all of that stopped. What happened?
Nothing has stopped, Mr. Mateza. We cannot solve the housing problems on our own in this country. We cannot wait for government as well.
It's a joint venture, if I were to put it like that, between the public sector and the private sector, particularly in the area of mines.
That's Rights and Recourse, Sundays 2 p.m. on SABC News.
The governments of South Sudan and Sudan have confirmed their commitment to the cooperation agreement signed in September 2012.
As a panel, we are very pleased indeed with the position taken by both governments to implement whatever is outstanding.
About 100 bodies have been retrieved from a shipwreck off the coast of Libya. The boat carrying up to 200 migrants sank 1 kilometer from the Libyan coast.
In recent months, many boats have been wrecked as thousands of migrants, mainly from sub-Saharan Africa, have crowded into poorly made vessels in an effort to reach Italian shores.
That's PM News every day, 3 to 5:30 p.m.
Now, next year, children from grade 4 to grade 12 will have the option of learning Mandarin as a second additional language. Plans to have Mandarin taught in schools were revealed last year, the 20th of March, when the department announced that Chinese curriculum would be developed with the help of the Chinese government. Now, to talk to us here about this, we are joined by the spokesperson for the Department of Basic Education, Elijah Mhlanga. I'm glad it's not that long title anymore, Elijah. It's now a spokesperson for the department. That's good.
Thank you.
Talk to us about Mandarin. Why Mandarin?
Why not? We already have Greek, we have Latin, we have Urdu, we've got Tamil, we've got French, we've got Portuguese. We have up to 15 languages that belong in that category of unofficial languages that are available in our schools as optional. And Mandarin is joining that list.
Now, you know the critics, I had critics right here in my workplace who came out this week and said, oh, we have 11 official languages and we're battling to teach the children some of the African languages. Why do we bring Mandarin? Why this? Of course, I agree. We should bring in Mandarin because it's simply another extracurricular language.
Absolutely. But apart from that, China is South Africa's biggest trading partner. We have a lot of students that are in universities in China. We have a lot of South Africans that are in China doing business. So it makes sense that we learn their language. In addition to that, China is assisting us with some of our math, science and technology work that we are doing in terms of curriculum implementation. So we need to get even closer to them by learning and speaking their language.
Now, it's not an easy, it's one of the more difficult languages to learn because you've got to learn, of course, a brand new alphabet and all the like. Do we have the teachers and do we have the kind of infrastructure to implement and to make it available on a sort of equal footing for all learners around the country?
Well, it's optional. That means a learner can choose to take it, but it's also optional in terms of a school choosing to offer it. There are some schools that already were offering these languages. In Gauteng, I think also in KZN, in Westville, there are some schools that are offering this. So all that is new that we are saying is that if you choose to take that language, you will be formally examined for it. If a school wishes to offer this language, they will have to make the arrangements to get the teachers to teach. But we anticipate that the Chinese government will assist us through their embassy here to get teachers that are able to teach in this language.
Now, Elijah, how are you going to roll this out? I understand it'll be a little bit easier in urban areas, but how do you then roll it out in the sort of rural areas where I think young people can really benefit from this kind of exposure?
Well, you know, if a school is really serious and parents do agree that there's a need for their children to learn this language, then arrangements will have to be made. They might even bring someone from China to come teach in that particular school. that language, or even arrange that somebody from that area teaches a cluster of schools in a particular geographical area. So some type of setup like that might become applicable to ensure that those that want it actually enjoy the benefit.
Cost. People always talk money in this kind of. Who's going to pick up the tab for this? And tell us more about this cooperation model that we're working with the Chinese government.
Yeah, they're assisting us in terms of curriculum implementation. And in fact, we have a formal agreement through the Department of International Affairs, but also as a Department of Basic Education. The minister has visited China several times, and some of the things that we are doing to improve our maths situation, we are doing in partnership with the Chinese government. And it's not just China, there are many other countries that are assisting us as well. So now this is part and parcel of implementing that agreement. And we expect that it will benefit us because the world has become too small now that everyone needs to be able to speak at least one or two foreign languages. And we have some of our officials say that when they go to France, they speak in French, and all South Africans, although they travel there with us, we get lost because she feels at home when she's there, and we feel like, you know, we are excluded. So there are many advantages to this, and we wish that people could embrace this.
That's what I say, but of course, you know, some of our viewers don't have the same view on this, and we've taken a question of Facebook, off our Facebook page this time. The viewers say, yeah, let's take a few of the comments quickly, and you can respond to the comments. I'll read that viewer's question. Okay, there we go. No, is that the wrong one? Give us the right one there, Johan. Okay, while we wait for the comments, the viewer question was, shouldn't the same money used in the training and hiring of new teachers teaching Mandarin be used to improve maths and science?
There's a budget for everything. There's a budget for maths, there's a corporation for maths, we have a maths office at the department, we're working with all our stakeholders, the Maths Foundation, we're working with Japan, we're working with the British, we're working with everyone to improve the maths performance when it comes to learner performance and school performance. But this one we are saying it's optional, so parents will have to agree to it. If you don't want it, don't take it. If you don't want your child to take it, tell them not to do it.
Well, Elijah,
it's as simple as that.
I'm going to get my child to do Mandarin because I think we need to broaden our horizons. I think it's a fantastic thing that you're introducing at the department because we need it, and we need to have a multipolar world where we open our children's eyes to more than just the traditional French-German. I did German in school, and to be honest, I hardly speak it today because there's no place for me to speak it. So, Elijah, thank you very much. I thank you for joining us also to come in and talk about this issue because we've had a lot of traction on this story on social media. A lot of people involved in, of course, in South Africa. We always see the worst. We go, why Mandarin? Why don't we use the money for something else? Well, let's just try and widen our horizons a little bit. There is a budget for the other stuff. And it's optional, by the way. You don't have to let your child do Mandarin. Anyhow, thanks, Elijah. Thanks for coming in today and clearing up this thing because at times, you know, there's always an emotional response to everything in South Africa. Thanks once again.
Thank you.
That's the spokesperson for the Department of Basic Education, Elijah Mhlanga, joining us talking about why they're introducing Mandarin in South African schools.
Let us go to this dollars issue, dollars eventualis, dollars director. What do they actually mean to the ordinary man in the street?
A practical and easy example of dolus eventualis is where two robbers walk into a bank with the intention to rob the bank. They reconcile themselves that should the teller press the panic button, they are going to pull a trigger and kill. So the intention is not to kill, but the intention is basically to rob the bank.
That's Rights and Recourse, Sundays 2 p.m. on SABC News.
President Robert Mugabe began a state visit to China on Sunday in a bid to lure investment in his country's stagnant economy. President Xi Jinping hailed Mugabe as a renowned African liberation leader.
Proudly, South Africa is indeed pressing on with its Ubuntu School campaign, launched in 2012.
Somehow, as South Africans, we have drifted from the core of who we are. We have kind of lost a sense of identity.
The program aims to address the rising levels of sexual violence and bullying at schools.
You find the amount of hooliganism and sexual violence in schools. So it's actually quite disturbing. And the challenge is quite huge.
PM News every day, 3 to 5:30 p.m.
Now, racism in Cape Town has been making headlines, but could Gauteng be the most racist province? Well, in the last financial year, the Human Rights Commission received 260 complaints of racial incidents, with Gauteng in first place with no less than 94 complaints. However, it isn't clear whether this is indicative of actual racism in the province or whether other factors are influencing the high numbers. To talk to us about this, we are joined in studio from the South African Human Rights Commission. It's the spokesperson, Isaac Mungena, is with us this morning. Good morning, sir. Thank you for joining us.
Good morning, and thanks for having me.
This is an interesting report with all the complaints that you've received. What does that tell you? How do you decode this report?
Look, I think we need to clarify one thing, that this is not a scientific survey, one can put it that way. It is actually based on the number of complaints that the Human Rights Commission is receiving across the country, and Gauteng has been leading in terms of the number of racism complaints that we have been receiving. And this can be because of several reasons. One, because of maybe our offices in Johannesburg is closer, it's in close proximity to most public transport. People can just walk in and lodge complaints, or also the fact that maybe people in Gauteng are actually aware of their rights, and they come through to report when there are violations, as compared to places like Northern Cape, which we have offices in Uppington, far from Port Nolloth, 5 hours actually drive to our offices. It means the person in those far-flung villages cannot be able to take transport to come to the Human Rights Commission to lay complaints.
Okay, so there is that kind of dynamic, though.
Indeed.
On a wider question, are we seeing an increase in racism in general and racial incidents, racially fueled incidents in South Africa?
Indeed, we are receiving lots of racism complaints as the Human Rights Commission. In fact, last year, of all the 10,000 cases that we dealt with across, throughout the year, racism was the highest complaint, and it's a very worrying trend, and it really shows that there is a lot that we really need that really needs to be done to basically deal with issues of racism in the country. And most of that racism is actually coming from the social media, which also gives us an idea that people are not being responsible on social media. People get hurt in the process of tweeting or Facebooking, and they just write stuff on social media against others. Racial intolerance, xenophobia, and even religious intolerance is coming up on social media most.
We see a lot of this kind of social media, online racism happening on the pages of media outlets, where on these kind of blogs and forums, people can come on anonymously and leave all kinds of comments. At the Human Rights Commission, do you believe that these publications, these media houses should take responsibility and more responsibility for the kind of comments that appear on their blogs and pages?
Indeed, we actually raised this issue with the editor, Sanef, last week on Friday when we met, around expressing concern around the kind of comments that are coming up on social media and also on news websites, but also not trying to stifle debate and information sharing. We're basically saying there should be a way to be able to censor some of this derogatory comments that are coming up, and we should find a way to do that. But not only media houses, even individuals themselves. You would have seen yesterday. Actually, it's in the news today, whereby Sunette Bridges, the African singer, was actually accused of
creating a platform for racism.
For racism, but we reached a settlement with her, and she actually agreed to actually help the Human Rights Commission in this, and she agreed that some of the comments that were made, not necessarily by her, but by the people,
her followers or supporters,
she is
or
responsible
friends.
for that. She was not basically telling them that no, this is not the platform to use that. So even other people should actually be aware of that kind of judgment that was made by Judge Desai in Cape Town yesterday, that you can be held liable for the comments that are made, not necessarily by yourself, by other people on your wall. Another issue we're battling with in South Africa is xenophobia. Xenophobia is an issue that is probably the let's call it the fight we face as a nation here in the 21st century. How are you dealing with that as the Human Rights Commission? How many complaints are you getting, and how are you coming to terms with what I'm sure are an influx of complaints also? The Commission has been very concerned about this and very much involved in these issues of xenophobia, trying to get communities together. And actually, we've been aware of the simmering tensions between locals, especially in the business of informal businesses, the locals and foreign nationals. As early as last year, when we held a dialogue between the two, alongside the UNHCR and also Department of Home Affairs, and the police were also in attendance early December, where we basically tried to find ways to basically deal with these issues of xenophobia. That was even before Soweto happened, which was early this year. And it's very concerning that we still have those kind of situations. 21 years into our democracy, we thought we would have dealt with it. But also what we want to emphasize is the utterances by some of our leaders around this, because it will fuel racism if we don't guard against what we are saying, especially as politicians, as leaders, as kings. Now, there's some sort of denial of xenophobia in South Africa. There are quarters that call it criminality and not xenophobia. How do you view it at the Human Rights Commission? We've always expressed concern that mostly government officials were calling it criminality, and that in that way it means the correct resources are not being implemented to dealing with the situation. The only resources that were deployed were the police to arrest people, find them, and then bring them back into the community, which does not really address the fundamental issues on the ground, the issues that the communities are also raising against the migrants, and also what the migrants are saying against the locals, and also the police involvement in all these other corrupt activities and many other things. So I think we really need to call it for what it is, especially if your shop as a South African is not attacked, but the next shop, which belongs to a Somali national, is attacked. That shows that you're actually doing this not because of you're hungry. You could have attacked the South African shop, but you go straight to the Somali shop. And I think that's how we really need to deal with this issue going forward. And it's a problem that everyone needs to address. Civil society at all levels, we all have to step in. I thank you for joining us.
Let us go to this dollars issue, dollars eventualis and dollars director. What do they actually mean to the ordinary man in the street?
A practical and easy example of dolus eventualis is where two robbers walk into a bank with the intention to rob the bank. They reconcile themselves that should the teller press the panic button, they are going to pull a trigger and kill. So the intention is not to kill, but the intention is basically to rob the bank.
That's Rights and Recourse, Sundays 2 p.m. on SABC News.
Mandela is one of the Mandela granddaughters. Raised by her grandmother Winnie Mandela, born to Zinzi Mandela, she had a life that she now uses as a tale to change the lives of others.
grew up with my brother, who was 3 years younger than me. At that time, being born into my family and in that era, I grew up with in a household my grandmother used to call a transit camp, because we lived with a lot of men and women who were affiliated to the struggle. So there was a lot going on.
Zweleka Mandela went through more than one can think of. Growing up closely with a brother in Swaziland, she had a childhood that seemed normal from the outside look.
When I moved from living with my aunt in Swaziland, because my parents were also very young and involved with the struggle, I then was moved to exile where my grandmother was. And one of my fondest memories was she used to sell acha in yellow buckets to the community. And I used to sit in the kitchen and literally eat acha from the bucket.
Having her first drink at a tender age, she thereafter started experimenting with other drugs.
I had my first drink at the age of 9. The trauma of it all wasn't enough to stop me from drinking. And it was by the age of 13 now, I was already quite a heavy drinker, and I used to black out. By the age of 13, it wasn't now just the alcohol, it was now the drugs. I used to actually steal marijuana to smoke it. And then well into my teenage years, I then began experimenting with more drugs. Up until the age of about 20, when I then developed an addiction to cocaine for about 10 years of my life.
She fell pregnant at 17. When she was 22, she had a second child. On attempt to having a third child, her infant baby passed on 2 days after his birth.
What hurts me the most is, not being a mother that my kids deserved. The 10 days before my daughter passed away, I had been using, and I tried to burn myself alive. Soon after that, fortunately at the time I was at my mother's house, and unfortunately my kids were in the next bedroom, and I was trying to do this, trying to take my life. And my daughter was, I remember coming in and out of my room, in her room where I was placed by my brother, and, coming to tell me that she's coming to take care of me, because she knows I'm not okay, and that, she was going to be my mother, because, I needed help, and, home was no longer a safe place. And my mom then suggested that they go and stay with my aunt. For some reason, I never thought I would ever be living with the reality of the fact that I would never see her again.
Losing her firstborn daughter, Zenani, to a car accident, Zweleka was left empty and remorseful.
10 days whilst I was in hospital. In those 10 days, I missed her 13th birthday. And I remember she was quite upset when I called her, because I had missed her birthday, and I think I'd sent her a message that my mother read to her to say that I was really sorry that I was missing her 13th birthday, but that we were going to do whatever she wants to do when I come out. And then on the 10th day of my stay in hospital, my father and my aunt and my brother came in to tell me that she had been killed in a drunk driving accident. And
making things right, Zweleka now understands being a good parent to her children.
I think good parenting is a lot of things, and for me, one is being there for your kids. And I remember going into rehab 2 months after my daughter passed away. I checked myself into rehab. And I remember the one thing I battled so much with when I was there was my addiction counselor telling me, you weren't there for your children. And I was like, but I was. Like, I used to, I would try and make it home in time for them to wake up, do the whole putting on the uniform, and when they, do homework with my daughter, and then when she sleeps, and then I resume to, abusing the drugs and the alcohol. And I was like, but I was there. But he was like, no. You may have been there physically, but you weren't there emotionally. I don't think it would have happened the way it happened had I been a sober and a clean mother.
In her darkest days, Zoleka found comfort in her grandparents who always knew just what to say to make sense of the life that lacked hope and joy.
After Zanani passed away, my grandfather said to me that, remember, he was like, you're not the only person to have lost a child, and, he had lost a child as well. And he was like, I've lost a child, and there's so many women who've lost children, but the reason why it's happening to you is so that you can be an inspiration to other women. And so I think that kind of comforts me. It's unfortunate that I've had to go through all that, but I don't feel sorry for myself, but I think I'm more comforted, and I'm just more blessed because I know that I've been able to, help so many other people. I remember being so scared because, I had lost my aunt to breast cancer, my father's older sister. And to me, I was like, okay, how's that, the irony of it all? I've been suicidal all throughout my teenage years, and now, I don't want to die. Now I'm being told I'm going to die, because to me, breast cancer was a death sentence.
She completed her chemo on the 24th of April 2013 and was given a clean bill of health by an oncologist, and a month later, she conceived her now 5-month-old daughter.
I was in the comfort of my family and my loved ones, so that made it all the more easier. The side effects were unbearable. It wasn't so much, yes, I was upset by the fact that I was losing my hair, but I think what upset me more, like we were speaking earlier, was, the loss of my breast, and then it was the chemotherapy may affect your fertility.
Zoleka describes her new relationship as a miracle and her fiancé as the man she needs in the new chapter of her life.
I am in a better place in my life, having him in my life. My aunt and my partner Terry have, I think, helped me try and find my way back to God. And so I'm always appreciative of that. Terry has taught me how to pray again. And I think he's also just taught me to believe again. It's never too late to rewrite your life story, because it's not. What my grandparents have taught me, and that is, that it doesn't matter who you are or where you come from or what you've done, that you still have and always will have the power in you to make a difference in somebody else's life.